पूर्णमिदं पूर्णमिदः पूर्णात् पूर्णं मुदच्यते पूर्णस्य पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते. That sums up our deep philosophical insight into what Raji is called seamlessness. There is a fullness. The fullness is everywhere. You can take whatever you like out of it, it remains full. Brahme vidam amritam purastar. Brahma paschat brahma dakshinaschotarena. Ataschodham prasritam brahme vidam vishwamidam varishtam. In the ultimate analysis in the Vedanta, there is no duality. There is the same force and the same light manifesting in a million different ways that is behind the visible and the invisible universe. Ishavasya sarvam yat kinch jagatyam. All that we see in the universe, all that exists, all that has existed, all that will exist is permeated, is inhabited by the same divine light. This is the basic theory of the Vedanta. And that is why when he came to me with this great idea of a futuristic university and with the Mobius ring as the symbol and asked for a motto, he had chosen another motto about knowledge which I didn't think was appropriate. I suggested instead Anadi Ananta, without beginning and without end. Because knowledge is without beginning and without end, and consciousness is without beginning and without end. Rajendra Pawar, whom I have known ever since he was a very young man, who has a long family association with us and who has done so extraordinarily well in this very innovative field of information technology. Shri Vijay Thadani, who also chairs the NIIT Limited, Vice Chancellor Rajiv Shori, and distinguished friends, old and new in the audience. In fact, I am astounded to see how many people, how many friends. If I start naming them, all my time will go in that. But it is really a great pleasure to see educationists, to see scientists, to see thinkers, to see educational planners, and to see other friends and civil servants and others, and people from the corporate world whom I have known for the last 20, 30 or 40 years, and to see them all here together, which shows that what NIIT is doing is not merely another educational experiment, but which is something that has brought together a critical mass of talent from a broad spectrum of disciplines. And that, of course, is the first necessity to have a holistic university. I was honored when Raji asked me to be Chancellor. I seem to be what should I say, a born Chancellor. I was Chancellor at the age of 18 of the University of Jammu and Kashmir. And I remained Chancellor for 18 years. And let me tell you, I graduated from the university of which I was a Chancellor. I do not know whether those silly Guinness people have got this down in their book or not, but certainly it should get into it. Then at the age 30, I became Chancellor of Banaras Hindu University. And then after a 40-year break, I became Chancellor of Jawaharlal Nehru University. After 5 years, I was again elected Chancellor of Banaras Hindu University. And so it is my pleasure and my privilege to be associated with this excellent venture. I am neither a scientist nor a technologist, but I have been involved in education for all my life, and I do see in the NIIT a glimpse of the sort of future that education can have when the best minds get together. Before I get on to the rest of my speech, I must come back to something about God being a mathematician. There's an old joke that a surgeon, an architect and a politician were arguing. And the surgeon said, God must have been a surgeon because he produced Eve from Adam's rib. There's some ridiculous theory that of Adam's rib Eve was produced. So he said, that's a surgical operation. So the architect said, no, but before that, he must have been an architect because he produced order out of chaos. He said, okay, to the politician, but who created the chaos? As Pawar has already explained to you, this university is based on 4 principles, industry linked obviously, because without a link with industry it doesn't work. Technology based, that is virtually built into the very definition of the university. Research driven, the research in our universities generally is far from satisfactory. And there's a lot of research going on, but how much of it is of world standard? How much of it can stand comparison with peer groups around the world? Not very much, I'm afraid. So I'm hopeful that the research that is carried on here would really be a world class. And of course, seamlessness, which is the most interesting and fascinating of these 4 principles, which, as I've tried to explain, which involves a holistic approach to education, which involves breaking the barriers between man and nature, for example. Nature has got to be looked upon not as something to be dominated by the human beings, but as we are part of it. The Atharva Veda in the Bhumi Sukta very clearly lays down that we are part of nature. We have grown also along with nature. And therefore it is not as if we've been given dominion over nature to destroy as we like, but we have got to nurture it, because in the nurturing of nature, we nurture the human race. And therefore I'm very glad that special attention is being paid to green technologies in this campus. And I've been explained the way the heating, the cooling is going to take place, the way the water is going to be treated, the way the whole building is going to be designed so that it takes maximum advantage of the natural environment and in fact ends up by improving it substantially. What I found very interesting was that these 4 principles upon which NIIT is based run roughly very closely parallel to the 4 pillars of learning that we identified in the UNESCO International Commission on Education for the 21st Century. There was an international commission set up in the 90s, of which I happened to be a member. There were 15 members from around the world. And we came out with a very interesting report. I suggest that that report should be studied. It's not well enough known in Indian universities. The report itself is called Learning the Treasure Within. In other words, learning really is ultimately learning within ourselves. And we identified in that report 4 pillars of learning. And I thought that this morning I might share those with you, because as I said, they run in many ways parallel to what you are doing here. The first pillar is learning to know. The Jnana Yoga. Ahano bhadra kritavo yantu vishwataha. Let noble thoughts come to us from every side. There is a massive explosion of information now. It's apparently doubling every 5 years. And there's a tsunami of information. So now it is not a question of inadequate information. It's a question of whether we are able to withstand this tsunami, whether we are able to abstract from this huge mass of information, the World Wide Web, the internet and all, the information we need. Because from information, we've got to abstract knowledge, and from then knowledge, we've got to distill wisdom. That is how it goes. And therefore, learning to know, I think, is tremendously important. It involves the capacity to continue to ask questions. I think the questioning mind is very important. Our civilization is a questioning civilization. Our Upanishads are not revelations to whom we have to listen trembling. They are asked, Kene Shatam Patati Preshatam Mana. The student asks the Guru and the Guru responds and asks and responds. Similarly, the Gita is a series of questions and answers. So there's a important difference between a revealed text, which you cannot question because it's revealed, and our texts, the Vedantic texts, which are in fact based upon question and answer. And therefore that questioning spirit has to be continued down to the present day. And we've got to have the capacity all our lives to learn and to question. And this is not something that will finish when you finish your university. It is a lifelong process. I try and learn something every day. For example, today I learned that God is a mathematician. So I learn something new every day. And so this is a question of having minds that are sharp and bright and can continue to learn. All the things that I learned at school and college, all the chemistry, all the physics, all the history, all the geography, it's all out of date. But that's not the point. If one has learned the capacity to learn, if one has developed that capacity, then it stands you in good stead throughout your life. So therefore the first pillar of learning is learning to know, which corresponds largely with what you are trying to do here. The second is learning to do. That is again, as you say, you talk of industry-based and employment-based education. There's the Karma Yoga. Learning to know is the Jnana Yoga. Learning to do is the Karma Yoga. Because unless you are able to utilize the knowledge that comes to you, unless you are able to utilize the technology, it is really a waste. Unfortunately, in our present system, we have millions and millions of young people who drift aimlessly from school to college without being able to do anything, without getting any employment, and ultimately become unemployable. And so we need a revamping of our entire system. The IITs are great, the universities are great. What we need are hundreds and thousands of ITIs, industrial training institutes, where young people after school, after +2, they can be siphoned off into useful trades, into useful professions. There's a marvelous statement in a book by John Gardner called The Ambidextrous Universe, where he says, a society that honors philosophy because it looks upon it as a noble undertaking and looks down upon plumbing because it looks down upon it as a plebeian undertaking will get the worst of both worlds. Neither its theories nor its pipes will hold water. So it is not really what you do. You see, there is a theory that everybody must become a government servant. Or it's not what you do, it's the capacity to do something. And that is where we need a U-turn in our educational system. And that is where an institution like NIIT, which is doing undergraduate work also, can play a tremendously important role. Because learning to do, our +2 system has failed. You remember 30 years ago, there were 3 streams, humanities, sciences and commerce, and you were supposed to go off after that. That hasn't worked. Now everybody does +2, which is correct. After that, we must not have this aimless drift into college. We must have something. And we've also in our report said that you should be able to take a rain check. You should be able to go out into a profession and come back a little later and then do your degree, either through an open university or through a correspondence course. So that education, you can continue to upgrade your skills as you go through life. It's not only getting a degree once and then going the same path for the next 30 years. That era is now over. The teachers have to constantly upgrade their skills, otherwise they'll be incapable of teaching the new knowledge. And so I think this learning to do is very important. And as the Gita teaches us, it's not what you do, but it is the spirit in which you do it that really helps in your spiritual quest. It's immaterial. You can be a mantri or a santri. If you're a corrupt mantri, you're worse than an honest santri. Although you may go around with lots of security and VIP cars. That's not the point. The point is, are you to live together has become a critical and crucial input. Because without that, we are going to destroy ourselves despite all our great technological prowess and our technological breakthroughs. In fact, because of the technological breakthroughs, we may end up destroying ourselves. Like Atlantis, if you remember, you read about it in Plato, the great and glorious civilization, glittering with all the gifts of science and technology. And one night we are told it sank below the waves, unable to survive its own technological ingenuity. And that is what is going to happen to this earth unless we learn to live together. And learning to live together really means the transmission of certain values. Without a value-based education, it does not become meaningful. And there are, very briefly, with each one of these can be developed into a full lecture, there are very briefly 5 sets of values that need to be taught. The first are family values. Education begins in the family. And particularly now with the nuclear family, the family values are very important. Courtesy, consideration for elders, helpfulness. The problems of the elderly now, as the nation is growing older, elderly people now are beginning to find a problem. They're not always looked after. I'm not suggesting that anything that the elders said must be accepted, but at least they must be treated with courtesy and consideration. And the reverse is also true. Indian parents tend to be much too possessive. They want to run the lives of their children. That is not to be. Khalil Gibran says that your children come through you, but they do not belong to you. They come with their own karma, or their own DNA, or their own genetic picture, whatever you want to call it. And therefore, the over-possessiveness also is something that is destructive. Therefore, it has to be a two-way traffic. The elders have to be given due respect and regard, and the young people have to be given their freedom to think and their freedom to develop. So the family values revolve on the one axis is the generational relationship. The other axis is the husband-wife relationship. And that, to my mind, is absolutely essential. Neither the old Eastern tradition of the woman walking 3 paces behind the husband, or the equally absurd European tradition of the woman walking 3 paces ahead. I think that what is required is to walk side by side as an ardhangini, as a co-sharer in the adventure of living. And this reminds me of another joke. A person was posted in an African country, and there he noticed that the women were walking 3 paces behind. So then he went back to headquarters, and 10 years later, he again was posted to the same country, and now he saw that the women were walking 3 paces in front. So he said, you know, I'm very impressed. You've had this social revolution in 10 years. They said, no. We've had a civil war, and there are lots of unexploded mines still lying around. But that's not the sort of relationship we really want. We want to have a relationship. So you have family values. Then you have societal values: cleanliness, punctuality, teamwork, sahana bhavatu, sahana bhuraktu, sahiviryam karvavati, tejasvinavadhi tavastu bhavidvishavati. The old ancient Vedic prayer. Let us work together. Let us achieve together. Let us strive together. Let there be no hatred between us. Bhavidvishavati. And now, unless we can develop teamwork, that has been the problem in India. We've always had great individuals, great scientists, great politicians, great thinkers, great artists, but our teamwork is weak. I'm not only talking of cricket here, I'm talking generally of the fact that we work as a team. That is why I was so impressed when Raji explained to us the sort of team that helped him to build this NIIT. It's not only Rajendra Pawar, Rajendra Pawar plus a team of friends and advisors and elders who have helped. So without a team, even Sri Rama, we look upon him as an avatar. But even he couldn't go and rescue Sita until he first of all mobilized the Adivasis and the Vanvasis of South India, disciplined them, made them into an army, and then led them to Sri Lanka. Nobody came from Ayodhya to help him. All the forces, all the troops that he had, he was able to make there because he was able to build them into a team. And that teamwork, I think, is something very important, and that involves also, if I may say so, the fulfillment of one's fundamental duties. Everybody talks about fundamental rights in this country. The right to this and the right to that. Now we've given the right to education and the right to information and so on. What about the duties? Why doesn't anybody talk about fundamental duties? I don't want to embarrass you, but how many of you in the audience actually know that there is a separate chapter in our Constitution on fundamental duties? I don't think you were ever taught them. You're only taught fundamental rights. Let me inform you that Part 4A of the Constitution lists 10 fundamental duties. I was on the drafting committee of this, therefore that's how I know. Siddharth Swaran Singh headed the committee. Fundamental duties are there. They should also be taught. Not only fundamental rights. Ek haath se taali nahi bajti. Everybody in India is demanding more, demanding more. What about your responsibilities? Nobody asks you to burn your brides. We are the only country in the world where brides are burned. Is it not a shame and a disgrace that we talk about Ya Devi Sarva Bhuteshu Shakti Rupena Samstata? We glorify the woman, and then today you find that girls are killed even before they are born? How can you expect society to develop unless societal values come out of society itself? Unless people like you who are leaders of society, unless you set the way, unless you show the path. Yatyat acharati shreshtastatte vitro janaha sayat pramanam kurute lokastakaru vartate. The Gita says very clearly that in the way that the leaders behave, that will be followed by others. And look at the way people are behaving in our assemblies and in our parliaments. So we must be very clear where we are and what we are doing. And therefore, unless there is this societal values are built into our educational system, then there are interfaith values. I can go on at great length on interfaith values. I've been involved for 30 years in the interfaith movement. As long as there's fundamentalism and fanaticism in any religion, as long as the religions of the world are in conflict, you will never have peace in this world. Therefore, you've got to teach interfaith values. Ekam sat vipraha bahuda vadanti. The truth is one, the wise call it by many names. There are multiple paths to the divine. We've got to accept that. Who are we, denizens of a tiny speck of dust in this universe, to lay down that the illimitable splendor of the divine can only appear in one place and at one time and in one form? It's prima facie, it's unacceptable. I can say, yes, for me, my path is the best. But I cannot therefore say that because you are not following that path, therefore you can be blown up or killed or persecuted or murdered. Therefore, the interfaith values have to be taught. We've got to learn to respect other religious traditions. And therefore, we've got to see that these interfaith values are built into us. Unfortunately, we are not allowed to teach religion by our constitution. But I'm not talking about any particular religion. I'm talking about values. For example, the value of compassion, the value of helpfulness, the value of supporting the weak. These are not values belonging to any particular religion. They are universal values. And it's these universal values which are preached by all the great religions of the world, whether it is Christianity, whether it is Maulana Jalaluddin Rumi, the great Sufi leader, whether it is the rishis of the Vedanta, whether it is the Sikh gurus. You open any religion, you will find certain common values which can and should be taught or woven, as it were, into the structure of our education system. Then there are environmental values. That's a whole world by itself. The environment is rapidly depleting. The Himalayas are melting. When we fly up to Srinagar now, you fly along the Himalayas, you can actually visually see the glaciers receding every year. And unless we do something very quickly, we are going to be in very grave trouble. There will be millions of ecological refugees. Half of Bangladesh will be underwater. The Maldives will disappear. And therefore, I'm very glad that here in this university, you are paying special attention to environmental values and to environmental techniques. And that is something, again, I said, that has to be built in to the educational system. And then there are values for the global society. So this is all in the third thing that I was talking about. Learning to know, learning to do, learning to live together involves family values, societal values, interfaith values, and environmental values, and global values, by which we mean that although we are proud to belong to one country, to India, India is not the whole world. India is only one of 200 countries on planet Earth. If you envisage that beautiful photograph taken from outer space, the photograph of planet Earth, that shows us as we really are, a tiny speck of light and life against the unending vastnesses of outer space. So beautiful and yet so fragile. That photograph doesn't show you any divisions between Hindu and Muslim, or East and West, or North and South. It is one spaceship, one tiny spaceship upon which we are all living. And I think the time has come when we've got to grow out of our limited nationalism. We remain nationalists, but we must also become global citizens. Unless we become global citizens, we cannot sustain a global society, friends. And many of us who are born in the old, like you talked of the industrial age, I'm talking of the pre-global age, the nationalistic age. Now we've moved on to the global age. But conceptually we are still stuck in ancient mores and ancient mires, and that's why we can't get out of it. And therefore there should be values for a global society. And my final point, the fourth pillar of learning, perhaps the most important, is learning to be. Now learning to be is very ambiguous, like your fourth point of seamlessness. Learning to be. What is the inner growth? What is the light within you that everyone is looking for? What the Bible calls the light that lighteth every man that cometh into the world. What the Sufis call the Noor-e-Rohani. What the Sikhs call the Ek Onkar. What the Hindus call Vedaham etam purusham mahantam aditya varnam tamasap parastam. That great being shining like 1,000 suns beyond the dark. What Allama Iqbal talks about when he says, खुदी को कर बुलंद इतना कि हर तकदीर से पहले खुदा बंदे से खुद पूछे बता तेरी रजा क्या है. खुदी की बुलंदी, that is what yoga is all about. Developing your inner personality, developing your inner spiritual power, that has to be taught. At least the doors of perception have to be opened. And people must realize that the inner life is every way as important as the outer life. And this is something that young people have to be introduced to. Otherwise people skim across life, and before you know what is happening, the sands of time are running out and you find that you've come to the end of your tether. Without once diving deep into the depths of your own consciousness and trying to find out the treasures that lie there. Learning the treasure within. That is seamlessness. That is the final goal of education. And that is what I would like to leave with you on this very auspicious occasion of the inauguration of a new university revolving around a holistic paradigm of education, revolving around environmental values, revolving around seamlessness and getting out of the divisional attitude and sectional attitude that we have. This new university should become a beacon light for young people around India and around the world. And that is my blessing, that is my prayer to everyone. And I will close after again congratulating Raji and his colleagues for their marvelous achievement, which I hope to see continue to grow from year to year and decade to decade. I will close with a prayer to Mahalakshmi, the great goddess, not only the goddess of material wealth, but the goddess of that inner consciousness, which is the true wealth of the human being. And she is seated on a great white lotus. The lotus, as you know, is born in the muck and mire of the underworld, but comes out clear and glistening. Like our consciousness has emerged and evolved from the slime of the primeval ocean billions of years ago to where we are today. And she is dressed in spotless white, which is the symbol of the higher consciousness. She is full-breasted and deep-naveled, because she is the world mother. She is Bhavani Vasundhara Gaya. Her eyes are like lotus petals. because that in Indian iconography is the most beautiful shape for a woman's eyes. And she's richly caparisoned, bejeweled. She holds in her hand lotus flowers. As you know, at night in the darkness, the lotus sleeps. But when the sun rises, the lotus opens itself. That symbolizes the human soul that is asleep in the darkness of ignorance. But that when the light of wisdom shines, it opens itself to partake of the glory of that. And she's being bathed on either side by elephants. 6 tusked elephants are bathing her on either side with ambrosia, with amrita poured from golden jars. So you have this beautiful, imagine that photograph of planet Earth, superimpose upon it the goddess, the waters from where all life began, the plant life, the goddess seated on it, the animal life, and the ambrosia being poured upon her. And the prayer is, may she give us the wisdom, the courage and the compassion to build a new and a sane noble society. Yasa Padmasanastha, Vipula Katitati Padma Patrayatakshi, Gambhira Vartana Bhistanubharanamita, Shubhra Vastrottariya, Lakshmi Divyahi Gajendrehi, Manigana Khajitehi Snapita Hema Kumbhi, Nityam Sa Padmahasta Tava Vasture, Sarva Mangalyam.